Om Shri Vishva-karmīne Namaha. Om Shri Vishva-karmīne Namaha. Om Shri Vishva-karmīne Namaha. Wish you all a very happy Vishva-karmā jayanti or Vishva-karmā pūjā. As some people believe, there's no birth for Vishva-karmā and therefore there's no concept of jayanti, just a puja commemorating him every year for a week, actually from Rishi Panchami, which we also celebrated at one of the editions of our kids episodes, and all the way up to today, in some cases all the way up to Saturday. So it's a 5 or 7 day celebration in many places, starting from Rishi Panchami till about the Dvadashi. So that's about 7 days, one full week. And today is the main day in that. And Vishva-karmā, though I, with the slip of a tongue perhaps, mentioned he, is actually a concept, as is the case with all our gods. So it might sound bewildering to many of us in practicing so-called Hindus, but our true nature is that of the Sanātana Dharmā, wherein there's no religion, there are no gods, it's only the self. And when the self takes certain perfect forms out of our own imagination, they become our gods. And in that series, Vishva-karmā is really special because this particular concept of Vishva-karmā can actually bring us back from the fall that we have had towards religions thanks to 1,000 years of invasion, firstly by Islamic kings and then later by the East India Company of Britain. The kind of Western religion concept started getting imposed on ourselves, and just to be kind of compatible with the rulers at that time, we started calling ourselves a religion as well. They gave us the name Hinduism, which was actually a geographical identity associated with the Indus River. And slowly, what was such a wonderful way of life that we had followed for millennia together started deteriorating into things that were then construed as something bad with the Hindu religion, like for example the caste system, which was essentially just a well-perfected division of labor wherein the genetic characteristics were utilized in order to keep perfecting generation after generation certain skills with equal dignity of labor to every kind of task that needed to be performed in the society, right from those who were sharing wisdom to those who were sharing their physical prowess to protect and defend, to those who are doing business, to those who are doing science, technology, those who are doing so-called menial tasks. None of that was considered to be menial at all. Every one of them was significant. In fact, they were said to be the parts of the Paramapurusha, which essentially means the ultimate reality, and no part is more significant than the other. Nobody wants to get their legs amputated, would they? Just for the heck of it. So this led to a lot of unfortunate circumstances, and our invaders from the West and the rest of the world typically exploited this situation, and some opportunists amongst us gave in to that, and just to be on the right side of the books of the invaders, started exploiting their own brethren, their own folks. And so now it's time to get back to what we lost, both due to the invaders and some of our own who colluded with them. And the first step is to recognize that our so-called gods are far more than just merely gods. They are much more intimate to us. They are our own characteristics, right? We have seen what is Ganesha, it's our leadership abilities. We have seen what is Vinayaka, it's our own troubleshooting capabilities. We have seen what is Ekadanta, our own focusing capabilities. We have seen Vakratunda, what it means is our own flexibility. We have seen Muruga, our own valor and courage based on clear perception, that clarity of vision, and so on and so forth. But in that series, the most important thing that you need to understand is the fact that there was no religion. And we need to take that journey back, not in time, but in terms of our knowledge and wisdom and capabilities, to responsibility. Yes, it's a journey from the outside ritualistic religion to the innermost core of who we are in terms of a responsibility. Because all the meanings that I just mentioned for Ganesha, for example, or for Muruga, or Parvati as our own celebratory spirit peaking, or Shiva as our own nothingness, Vishnu as our own everythingness, Lakshmi as our own ability to target our energies towards our goal, in particular our goal towards recognizing our own everythingness, our omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience and eternity. And in doing all of this, what we do is we take up charge of our own lives, not depend on some external factors for our own happiness. Yes, there is a so-called externality for these three guys, the body, mind and intellect, and not for us. And for them, yes, there is a boundary. There are immediate neighborhoods and then there are farther neighborhoods, immediate neighborhoods being, let's say, a home or an office or your family or your colleagues, and then beyond that your society, nation, etc. But at the root of it all, we see is the fact that there is our true nature, which is beyond boundaries. Now, once we recognize that, we become omnipotent, we become omniscient, we become omnipresent, and therefore all inclusive and embrace everybody, and we are eternal as well. So, it's in that true identity that we can operate according to the principles of Sanātana Dharmā, which are just the laws of nature. Newton might have discovered these laws just a few centuries back, but the laws of nature have been there for billions and trillions of years. So, a simple thing to see is just, if I have a rod like this and I apply certain tension to it, which is essentially a pull force with my right hand, you see there. If my left hand were not resisting that, this would move, right? So for it to be still and static and stable, I need to have this action opposed by a reaction. And that is essentially the law of karma when transposed from space to time. What does it mean? Now here you see that my action with the right hand and reaction with the left hand, these two are separated from each other by a certain distance, which means there's a space between them, right? And what's happening to the thing in between? It is getting stretched, and as the stretch increases, it's getting tensed. And this word tense I'm using purposefully because it has many connotations in the English language and it's associated with tension. right? And you know about not only physical tension that we are demonstrating here, but emotional or mental tension as well. Now what happens? As I apply this action, immediately there is a reaction at a different spatial point. They are separated by a distance. But the same word tense is also used in the context of time in English, and that's not a coincidence. You know about present tense, past tense, and future tense, right? So some action that I do or did in the past can have a reaction either now or little later in the future, or even further in the future, or much later in the future, not even in this life but in a future life. But it will definitely have a reaction. That is what is important to notice. Now, so therefore, there is no escape. This is inevitable. In other words, it's an unfailing mailing system or an unfailing messaging system, fully encrypted from end to end, as the tagline for some of the popular ads these days goes, right? Now that's essentially what is karma. And we are talking about viśva-karmā today, and it's so easy to see the true meaning of that without having to be a Sanskrit scholar or being a philosopher. No, just two words, viśva and karma, that all of us use in some context or the other, how much ever our exposure to the Indian culture and tradition might be. Whether Bharatiya or not, doesn't matter. You all have heard these words, and many people are named Vishwa or Vishwa Prasad, etc. as well, right? Now, what does viśva-karmā mean? Karma we already saw. It's an inevitable reaction to actions. So action is also called karma, reaction is also called karma, and the law connecting them is also called karma, because they are one and the same. Brahmarpanam brahmahavir brahmagnau brahmanahutam brahmaiva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina, said Sri Krishna to Arjuna. Of course, once again plagiarized from the Upanishads. What it essentially means is that when a sacrifice is being performed, the sacrificial pit, what is being sacrificed, the sacrificer, and to whom that sacrifice goes, every one of them is Brahman, Brahman, and Brahman alone. That is our true self. We are doing the sacrifice of ourselves, to ourselves, in ourselves. So this is the beauty of it, right? So similarly, the law is also called karma, the action is also called karma, and the reaction is also called karma, and they are separated by time now instead of space. And space and time have the same word, as I've told you many times, kala, right? It's just a field, a kshetra, or kedara as we call. So it's Kedarishwara, for example, in Kedarnath, whose vrata we celebrated just yesterday. We talked about it. Now, what is it that viśva-karmā means? Karma is essentially action, which when generalized is our thought and our spoken word as well, right?
I don't see an app called
Now, yes, the recording is still going on. Siri, please don't disturb me, okay? Now, yes, because in between I lost the recording and then had to re-record, and sometimes I go with the flow, not out of my memory, but out of my own experiential truth and what I perceive at that point of time, and sometimes things can be missed. Maybe I should have a backup recording as well.
I'm not sure I am.
Okay, that's fine. So that's karma. So this is individual karma, right? Between me and Siri, what's happening there is an individual karma. That an individual is facing the repercussions of some of his past actions, some of his past words, some of his past thoughts, a conglomeration of that. Inevitably comes sooner or later, but definitely does. And who delivers? Doesn't matter. It's there that the next level of karma comes from the individual to the group or common karma or collective karma or societal karma, can grow up to a national karma, global karma, etc. Right? Now, what's happening over there? Their karma in some way is related to our karma, and therefore a transaction takes place, balancing out some of the karmas, creating perhaps new karmas in the process. So new actions, which will again bring in reactions sometime else. So this cycle keeps on going, action, reaction, action, reaction, at the individual level, at the collective level. But there is something way beyond all of this, which is at the universal level. That's including all of space and time. And that is viśva-karmā. And that's the amazing movie that's unfolding from the formless, eternal, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient Brahman to all these groups of galaxies. Within those galaxies, various stars and planets, meteors, comets, asteroids, black holes, etc. And within each one of those planets, a potential living system, which again in terms of many different species like on Earth. And within each one of those species, let's take the human species, various genders, various professions, various educational levels, various levels of economic prosperity, and caste and creed and religion and all these languages that they speak, the racial background, etc., etc. Now, all of this is happening wonderfully and unfolding as a movie, right from the so-called Big Bang to what we now recognize as dark matter and dark energy, creating an expansive universe. That is essentially what is viśva-karmā. Instead, we bottled him up into just a humanoid-like figure. Some recognize him as a youth, some recognize him as an old man, sitting with his two vehicles, very interestingly, a swan or hamsa as we call it, and an elephant or gaja. Elephant to showcase the intellect, the science, the reasoning that is required of any craftsman. And we all are craftsmen, not just the people who work on metal, wood and mortar, rocks, cement, etc., namely the masons, the carpenter and the various smiths, Mr. Smith, Mr. Blacksmith, Mr. Goldsmith, Mr. Bronzesmith, etc. These divisions of labor were there as much in Europe and America as it was in India. And for a reason, because genetically they were trained to evolve in that, and as long as there was a dignity of labor, giving everybody the prestige and place in society because they were contributing towards the society, that each person looked at the other as an equal and as a goal of his life to embrace him or her in an all-inclusivity, sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas and sabka prayas. And that prayas or work or effort is the labor that is involved. And so now we are talking about this particular person, personified form of universal karma called viśva-karmā, is given two vehicles or dhvajas, as we call them, flags or mascots. And one is the elephant showcasing the requirement of science, and the swan, which is capable of extracting milk out of a solution of milk and water, mythical bird. But essentially, it's a question of art, the attention to finer details, the geometry that is required. And therefore, you see the equal importance for the elephant and the swan, meaning an equal importance for science and arts, for the right brain and the left brain, for the Ida and the Pingala, for our masculine nature and our feminine nature, for the flow of breath through both the left nostril and the right nostril in an equal sense. Every now and then I need to check this. Yes, it's going on, the recording. Thanks. Now, we have to go many steps forward, because if you look at what he holds in his so-called four hands, our universal karma when personified, is a book, which means certain laws to be followed, certain knowledge to be retained in one's memory, and an imagination based on that, built over that, subject to the constraints of the laws and the materials that are available, which is why in one of his hands he has some construction material, and in another hand he has a measuring rod, showing the equal importance of what something or somebody is made out of, the materials, and in what proportion they are made out of that through the measurements, which is essentially about our geometry. So a structure, be it a non-living structure like a building like this, or a living structure like the human body like this, both of them require a certain type of or combo of materials in order to be lasting, with happiness, with joy in the case of a human or a living being, and strong, stable and stiff in the case of a non-living thing. Both cases fulfilling their purpose over a reasonable period of time. Finite, but long enough. So now, in order to be constructed in that way, not only is what I eat important, but how I keep my geometry in certain symmetry conditions, which is what asanas or hatha yoga is all about, to render this in a particular geometry. Similarly, the structures that we make have both a material strength and a geometric strength, a material stiffness and a geometric stiffness. Both contribute towards this. And this is why the viśva-karmā has, in one hand, materials to work with, the other hand, the measuring rod to ensure that the geometry is taken care of, the proportions are taken care of, etc. It's symbolic of all kinds of measurements that we need to do to maintain the geometric configurations, the arrangement, the architecture that is involved. Yesterday we celebrated Engineers Day on the birthday of a civil engineer. It's more particular and pertinent to viśva-karmā as much more than Mokshagundam Vishveshwaraya. Because this is a much more ancient tradition. Vishveshwaraya happened just about 161 years back. But this is a tradition 161 billions of years that ever since nature or universe has existed, right from the Big Bang. Right? So now, what are we talking about over here? Viśva-karmā as a universal karma, or the universal law of action and reaction, or the universal action, or the universal reaction. They all have the same name, viśva-karmā. And in its humanoid form, as a so-called God, he is said to have 5 children. And those children are supposed to be a carpenter, a mason, a bronzesmith, a blacksmith, which means they work with iron. You see the ages there? We talk about the Bronze Age, Iron Age, and then a goldsmith. And absolutely no hierarchy between them. Everything that we're talking about, absolutely no hierarchy. Whether it's a caste, whether it's a profession, whether it's our chakras, whether it's the gods, so-called, they are all concepts of equal importance. As I told you, you wouldn't want to unnecessarily get your legs amputated as much as you don't want to get beheaded, right? They're all equally important. So, it's only then that you have a holistic life. It's like parts of the body, the parts of a society, parts of how we structure our day-to-day lives, so that we have all our requirements and no one person needs to do all the work. It's equally divided between members of the society based on their own capabilities. Now, does that mean that a person born in a certain caste or in a certain family has to continue performing the same thing? No. There were always exceptions, and exceptions were allowed in this whole system because of the different births that we take. In the past births, we could have been the son or daughter of a different profession. And so we do have those tendencies as well. In this birth, just because I was born to, let's say, a professor or an engineer in the previous birth, I might have tendencies to become one, even though I may not be a son of a professor or engineer in this birth. I'm a son of a doctor, right? So this kind of a tendency can come from various births. So there's no clear-cut demarcation that if you are born in this, you have to have this, because genetics is not only in the physical body in the form of genes, but is in your subtle body as well in the form of your mind and intellect. And there is a carryover from the previous lifetimes as well. Such is the complicated nature of the law of karma. Instead of trying to understand it thoroughly as a theoretical knowledge or a treatise or a thesis or a dissertation out of it, no, let's just experience it and practice it. Because whether you accept it or not, it's anyway going to happen. It's inevitable, as I said. It's a fail-proof system. So you might as well accept it joyously, not grudgingly, so that you might accept it consciously, not compulsively or accidentally. You then will have the utmost ability to do your actions currently in the present moment in a conscious nature, so that you don't create new reactions. You create only responses, and responses are what we call as kriya, as opposed to reactions, which are karma. So the same action that you're performing, the same words that you're speaking, the same thoughts that you're getting, if you do it consciously instead of unconsciously, with awareness instead of without awareness or accidentally, joyously instead of grudgingly, then there is a possibility that you are converting mundane processes of physicality into spiritual processes of metaphysicality, beyond the physical, beyond the boundaries. And then instead of creating karma, you are creating kriya, which are responses which don't add to your baggage. And there's no reaction coming later. Instead of the reaction, we had the response. And that ability to respond is within every one of us. And it's infinite, unbounded, and limitless. It's just that we need to recognize it and put it into action. And that's what viśva-karmā actually teaches us. So, we need to make sure that we understand these concepts like Vishwa-karmā in their fullest sense. What you're listening in the background is the Viśva-karmā Suktam, which is not something which came out of some Puranas, like some of the other more popular gods were not even there in the Vedic knowledge system, but just cropped up later on thanks to Vedavyasa to some extent. But his own forefathers like Parashara Maharishi or people prior to that didn't have this, like Vashishta Maharishi, etc., Shakti. These people didn't have many of these new gods that we are creating over and over. Yes, we should create, because what are these new gods? New tools. Like we have created a smartphone, a computer, a television, different kinds of construction materials and different kinds of constructed buildings, bridges and so on and so forth. All of these are making our physical lives comfortable. They are essential. Every one of them, if you would want to call Krishna, Rama, Sita, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Shiva, Parvati, Brahma, Saraswati, Ganesha, Kartikeya, Ayyappa, etc. as gods, then you better call your smartphone, your fan, your light, your TV, your vehicles, etc. also as gods, because they are all equal tools. And that's why we had this celebration of Ayudha Puja, which continues in a blind ritualistic fashion today, but without recognizing the fact that you are bowing down to your tools which have helped enhance your life. They are part of you. And the most important tools, of course, are our own body, mind and intellect. And that we should keep recognizing every now and then. And take care of them properly by understanding how they operate, what they are made out of, and their geometry apart from their material construction, and then putting them to the most optimal use for yourself and for the society at large. So with this, probably I'll conclude today's discourse, today's edition of Kindergarten to intimately discover ourself. Vishva-karmane namaha. As I said, this Vishva-karmā Suktam that you are listening in low volume at the background is something that was of Vedic folklore, not something which came up much later in the Puranic literature 5,000 years ago. No, it's much, much earlier than that, the concept of Vishwa-karmā and many other so-called gods, but essentially features of ourselves. Indra, for example, is our sense organs. Agni is our digestive fire. It could be in many other forms of that fire. So essentially these Panchabhutas and our five sense organs, five organs of action, the mind in all its form, like the manas, buddhi, chitta, ahamkara, etc., have been personified just to create certain beautiful, weave certain stories around that, many of which were based on history. Many of these stories are not made up stories, imaginations, but by looking at what's happening in history, this is how we learn from history to correlate the macrocosm with the microcosm and understand that history that is unfolding day by day is what is happening within us too. And we put that into practice. And that's the beauty of experiential wisdom as opposed to mere bookish knowledge or collection of information, which doesn't have any place today. The need for huge memories at the brain level is no longer needed because your computers and your cloud systems and even your smartphones and smartwatches can store much more than probably you would memorize over a long period of time. You can access it whenever you want. What's more important is to understand the relevance of all of these information that is there at your fingertips, how to put them together, both artistically and scientifically, for an engineering, technological creation, and make our lives beautiful, make the lives of everyone around us beautiful. And that's why this was already there in the Rig Veda, the oldest knowledge system or wisdom system that you can ever think of. Not only of India, of entire humanity. And these are universal laws, not only valid on earth. And there in the 10th chapter of the Rig Veda, you find this suktam. It's a short suktam, can be sung in about 3 to 4 minutes. It's what you're hearing in the background. On viśva-karmā, not the God, but viśva-karmā, the universal karma. Because people know these divisions of karma in terms of prarabdha karma, sanchita karma, agami karma, etc. Sanchita, that which is accumulated, prarabdha, that part of the karmic balance that is being executed in this lifetime, agami karma, that which is going to come up in the future, etc. Right? Actionable karma, so to speak. Now, let's go beyond that, and the classification that we saw today was in a different sense. It's about individual karma, a group karma, which could be societal, national, global, familial, etc. And a universal karma, which goes beyond our own planet, our own solar system, our own galaxy, to the entire universe or multiverse, if you would have it. Right? So it's a omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, eternal, not only being, but a law as well that governs this, the nature, the characteristic of it, of that which has no character or no nature. And that everythingness and nothingness that we oscillate between our Vishnu Tattva and Shiva Tattva is why Vishwa-karmā is said to be Prajapati, Pashupati, Shiva-Rudra, and Vishnu all rolled into one, just like Dattatreya. Vishwa-karmā is all of them as well. Tvam Brahma, Tvam Vishnustvam, Rudrastvam, Indrastvam, Agnistvam, Vayustvam, Suryastvam, Chandramastam, Brahma Bhu Bhuva Swarom, we say in the Ganapatyattva Vishwashopanishad. So whichever is your Ishta Devata, essentially that quality you are operating. So that's said in pretty much the suktams or Upanishads associated with every one of these so-called gods, which are so-called our own qualities. When perfected, take the form of these gods that you can visualize outside, but more importantly, utilize inside as a quality, as a capability to make our lives and those of others' lives far more beautiful than we are making it right now. So that's what it is. And it's not only in the Rig Veda, it's also in the Yajurveda, both the Krishna Yajurveda and the Shukla Yajurveda, the same suktam, of course with slightly different intonations. It's there in the Atharvana Veda as well. And it's there in the Shveta-Shvatara Upanishad, which is where the reference to Vishwa-karmā as Shiva-Rudra comes up. So he's our own nothingness as well, in its most passionate form, in the form that can create not only buildings and cities, which is why I'm wearing this, create temples, it can create cities like Siem Reap in Cambodia, one of the wonderful places with Angkor Wat and things like that. Massive structures. Lanka was created by him and Dwarka was created by him. Vishwa-karmā as a person. But what do we mean? It is by all of nature getting together in a focused manner to create something beautiful. That's what it means. The collective responsibility going or tending towards infinity in the limit as a universal responsibility. The universe has manifested itself, maintaining itself, preserving itself, sustaining itself, and will dissolve itself. And in that process, what we are talking about is the validity of this law of action and reaction, and how to go beyond this cycle into kriya and to responsibility rather than religion, into our own characteristics, our own nature, our own self rather than God's. So with this, let me conclude once again the chant of Om Namo Viśva-karmāya. Om Namah Viśva-karmine. Om Shri Viśva-karmāya Namaha. Recognizing that we are not bowing down to a humanoid version of Viśva-karmā or a caste Viśva-karmā, but to every one of us, the skill within us, the ability to engineer things, to make beautiful structures, static and moving, be us aerospace engineers or naval architecture engineers or automotive engineers or civil engineers, whatever engineering we might be doing, whatever other tasks that we might be doing, creating some beauty out of it, that is what Viśva-karmā really means. To create out of what is already there, just transforming it into a beautiful, utilizable fashion. Because what you're doing at the present moment has repercussions in the future. And if you do it consciously, if you do it lovingly, if you do it with awareness, then those repercussions are not in the form of reactions, they are in the form of what we call as responses. Therefore, recognizing our individual, societal, global, national and international and universal ability to respond consciously with full awareness. Namaskar. See you in the next episode.